well, the invitation I've extended on your behalf. And I'm told it's an informal chat about independence, so I will attempt to keep it that way. What's your name? Jonathan, right? As Jonathan said, I'm a political consultant, which is my primary source of income. And political consultancy is a somewhat unusual type of work. There are not a lot of us, certainly not a lot of us in Barbados and the Caribbean doing this. One of the good things about political consultancy is that it gives me the opportunity to move around the region. And I'm on the road quite a bit once I'm working in different Caribbean islands. And the great thing is that you get to experience the realities of different Caribbean islands on the ground and speak to people face to face. It has brought me in touch with countries like Barbados, of course, which is like St. Lucia and St. Vincent. We're all independent countries. And then, of course, it brings you in touch with countries like Bahamas and Bermuda, where I've worked, the British Virgin Islands as well, and Turks and Caicos Islands. And those are places that we're not independent. I'm also fortunate to have traveled fairly widely outside of the Caribbean region. I have a partner who's resident in France, so as a result, I go there quite regularly. And it gives you an opportunity to see Europe as well, face to face, and understand their independence experience. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of those experiences and essentially give you a perspective, my perspective on independence, and also I want to hear a bit from you about your perspective on independence and what it really means. One of the key things I want to talk about is the difference between independence in theory and independence in practice. And then I also want to talk a bit about the fact that independence really brings with it a certain amount of responsibility, which is something that I think we often forget is part of it. So let's start first with independence in theory and independence in practice. And maybe one of you could tell me what you understand independence to be, so I can get a sense of where you are, how you're seeing it. So maybe we can start with the young man. Yeah, introduce me. Yeah. So when you think of independence, what does it mean?
Like breaking free from constraint. So becoming more free from what controlled you from before.
So in a sense, it's like when you become 18 and you're no longer under the control of your parents.
Yeah, a little bit. You're more responsible for yourself, but you still live in the house probably.
21 then?
Yeah, maybe 21 probably.
What's the difference between 18 and 21 when you think about it? Because legally, as you're 18, you're an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because between 18 and 21, in most instances, 18 you can vote and you have the legal responsibility. But ultimately, you can't provide for yourself. So you kind of carry over to 21 largely because usually by then you're in a better position to provide for yourself. Okay. In my case, I started off my life independently, obviously, at 30. Right? Because I was enrolled in studies. I did my first degree, second degree, third degree. And there was short periods of work in between, but largely I was still my parents' responsibility until I was 27 years old. So my independence started at 27. One of the things as a child I always said independence would bring is the ability to do what I wanted, basically what I was saying. So, I figured I would work more often, I would drink more heavily. As far as the consumption of food is concerned, I said that I would eat the types of things I wanted to eat. So I loved cereals, sugary cereals, cocoa puffs, and that kind of thing. So I said I would go to the supermarket and buy all the things and live on them. Okay. I also said that soft drinks, because I grew up in a house where sweet drinks were a rarity. We had sweet drinks when it was Christmas or when my parents were entertaining, but we would never had a custom of having sweet drinks at home. So I said I would basically have all the time. I would have sweet drinks. It's ironic that when I hit 27 and I had responsibility for myself, one of the first things I did is I became a vegetarian. And then I essentially stopped drinking those drinks altogether, unless it's a rum and coke. But generally speaking, I don't drink those drinks because I've learned that there's no responsibility I have for myself. That means that that's probably not a good idea. But I'm glad you started there with independence, because as a country, when a country becomes independent, essentially it means you break free. And there's this theory that we were under the colonial control, where the British government controlled what happened in the country, and we were under their guide, their control, and we wanted to break free. So in 1966, Barbados went, and most of the other Caribbean islands went. We tried a federation that didn't work out. They were telling us that we could get independence on our own, and we went and we pursued independence. The theory is, or the myth is, that we fought for it. The reality is that the British were happy to get rid of us, quite frankly. Because there's a bit of a background to it that you may find interesting that started post-slavery. And most people feel that slavery ended because the British and the French had this epiphany that black people should not be held as slaves. If any of you have read Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, right, or you probably would read it, it's a very good book, and in that Eric Williams tells you that slavery had nothing to do, the end of slavery had nothing to do with morality. It had everything to do with economics, because the economics of slavery was just not working out. So it was far better when you look at the declining fortunes of sugar, because by then sugar was declining in value. You then had this massive labor force that you had to take care of. Right? You had groups in the United Kingdom that were saying that you could not treat slaves like cattle any longer, that you had to take care of them, you had to look out for their health and their well-being, and all of these things. So the British came up with this idea that after you had declining fortunes in sugar, it was better to emancipate slaves because there was nowhere for them to go and work for you anyway. So it's better to pay someone a little bit of money when you know that they have to work for you than to have responsibility for them, to provide for all of these things and to give them food and clothing and shelter and all these kind of things, just to get them to work for you. So the economics made sense. Free the slaves, they still work for you on the plantation, you can pay them whatever you want, and you don't have to concern yourself with whether the wage you pay them can buy food and provide and take care of healthcare and all of those kinds of things. So that was the reality of the end of slavery. Once slavery ended, and once the decline of sugar continued, the economics of the Caribbean islands and maintaining them was a problem. So then you had the 1930s, which was a period where across the Caribbean everyone was rising up and whatnot. And what were they rising up about? Everybody here is wearing school shoes. Right? My grandfather was a writer in those days, and he used to talk about the fact that so many kids were not wearing shoes. Now, it's normal that everybody wears shoes, but in those days, children were not wearing shoes. People were living in conditions where you were having, these are the descendants of slaves, living in conditions, many of them on the plantation, where they did not own the house that they lived in. Well, in a sense, they owned the house, because the house was a piece of board, but they didn't own the property. And the concept of a chattel house would have emerged around that time, where your house was essentially these four walls that you would pick up and move and look for somewhere that you could rent a house for. There was no plumbing, no toilet, so you were using outdoor facilities. There was disease was rampant, malnutrition was rampant, and people as a result were just essentially showing their anger. So we had riots across the Caribbean in the 1930s. We had a riot in Barbados where people just went, and all of the merchants in this road, they turned over their bread carts and they made mayhem just to let the government know, look, we're not happy. Things are not right. We can't provide for our families. The conditions are poor. Our government had abdicated its responsibility. We were colonial at that time. We were part of the British Empire. So now you have a second epiphany that occurs where slavery ends because of the economics. And then you have a situation where the colonial arrangement is not working out because the British are being told, if you're going to keep these colonies, you have to keep them properly. You have to provide for healthcare, you have to have clinics, you have to have immunization, there has to be a school feeding program so that every child who goes to school can eat, because that's all part of the deal. So you can't just have a colony and do like you did with the former slaves, just release them. You actually have to take care of them. So So this thing became pervasive. We had the Moy Commission, and the Moy Commission said, look, you got to do certain things that are going to cost you something. So the British government decided, we're going to do these things, we're going to provide some funds. They had a grant called the UNWomen facility that helped to provide for schools and so on. The Pine housing area, which you may know, was one of those housing areas that was started post-riots because at least it provided concrete structures with indoor plumbing and so on. But after that, we're going to encourage these islands to take independence. Because you know what, if you're independent, you can't come and ask me for nothing. And your point about your parents is a good one, because when you become independent, you can't go back to your parents' house, right? Well, you can, but it becomes more difficult, right? I used to go back a lot. I have a peculiar mother. My mother doesn't cook. Right? So my father cooks, but my mother doesn't cook. So after I moved out, most people will go back home on Sundays for food. In my case, you could as well don't bother because my mother ain't cooking. Right? So if my father was in a cooking mood, then yeah, that was happening. But most of you will go back home and you will enjoy a good meal and whatnot. When you become independent as a country, that's not an option. So that's the theory of independence, and it sounds good on paper, but in practice, independence is extremely difficult because it means then you have responsibility for yourself. So as a country, what do? You have to provide for immigration and customs because you have to regulate people coming and going. You have to then deal with your own issues of having, care, housing, and whatnot. We look at the airport story. Most of the islands in the Caribbean that have an international airport, Kitts and Barbados and whatnot, that would have been done long before we became independent. St. Vincent and the Grenadines never did it before they became independent. So when they became independent, they have a challenge where they have an expensive airport project to complete. So they just completed the Argyle International Airport, which was very difficult because it's hard when your GDP is so small. We can talk a bit about that later. To be able to do a big project like that, but you need an international airport to get tourists to come and to develop various sectors of the economy. But being independent carries so many responsibilities that one wonders why countries really bother with it in the first place. I have to tell you that I was a fan of independence when I was at school and when I was reading about the theory. But I wonder about independence now. I mean, I've done work in Bermuda, I've done work in British Virgin Islands, I've done work in St. Eustatius, that's another French territory. It's a place called St. Martin, that's Dutch and French, side by side. These places don't have independence. By then anybody compare. I mean, I had a statistic here which I pulled out when I was researching for today. The gross domestic product per capita, which is usually a measure that we use to see how much every individual in the country is worth. And it's a good comparative base. The GDP per capita for Bermuda is $85,748 US. So every Bermudan is worth $85,748. So they are a dependent territory. They are not independent. The probably most independent country that we can think of is the United States of America. Their GDP per capita is only $59,533 US. So here you have it, the quality of life in Bermuda. And I must tell you, has anybody here ever been to Bermuda? Yeah. It's very expensive, but you don't find the quality of life better? Yeah. I mean, you don't wait for a bus for longer than 10 minutes. Right? Nobody has cars, but not because they can't afford them. But they don't have cars because you have one car per household. Right? They have no military because they don't need it. So it's expensive, but the place is squeaky clean, and the facilities work. You pay a fortune, but they work. Everybody has their own water system internally. They know nothing of outdoor toilet facilities because they don't have them. They know nothing of bad roads. They showed me a place that was a ghetto. What's that?
It must be nice not to know
about
not
to know bad roads. So as a result, the cars last longer because they don't have shops and stuff. They showed me something called a ghetto, and I was amused because they don't have Fort George Heights. Whoa. So it goes to show you that our concepts of independence is strange. You know, when you ask Bermudians about independence, they ask if you're crazy. You know? So I'm talking to young people in Bermuda, and I'm saying, but don't you want to be independent like us? Yes, you should want to be independent like us. They say, why? So I could go and stand up in the line in the American embassy to get a visa. But that's an interesting conversation. Now, what does that have to do with independence? Right? I'm an independent Barbadian. I cannot live and work in any other country than Barbados. I need a visa to go to the United States of America. I need a visa to go to Australia. I need a visa to go to China. There's a visa waiver now for Europe. So, as an independent person, I need a visa to go all these places. A Bermudian who is still dependent can walk into the United States of America for the time being until Theresa May finishes her foolishness, can live and work in 52 countries in Europe. Sounds pretty good to me, but they're not independent. Let's look at the United States of America. The United States of America is a very independent country, fiercely independent. Where does America get their gas to get them through the winter season? They buy it from Venezuela, they buy it from Trinidad and Tobago, right? And the reason simply is that they don't have enough supplies on board to be able to last them. They have dependent relationships with the with countries in the Middle East because they need the oil in order to supply, to produce their complex. And even when you look at things like cars, you know, the American automakers are so heavily dependent on the Japanese, which is a comparatively smaller country, that they defeated in a war. So it turns the whole idea of independence on its head, and it is really not what we often thought it was. And I've reflected, you know, I write an article, and every year I'm at the stage where I had to do this independence article and stuff. And I've really been reflecting for a long time on whether or not this thing is such a big deal. Because my contemporaries in Bermuda enjoy a far better standard of life than me. My contemporaries in the British Virgin Islands enjoy a far better standard of living than me. I remember when they had a volcano in Montserrat. The Prime Minister at the time said, we can do one of two things. We can either evacuate the island and offer every single Montserratian the right to live and work in the United Kingdom. Or alternatively, we can try to come and work with you to rebuild facilities. Now, the older Montserratians weren't interested in going. I had a friend who was on campus with me. She was a lawyer, and she packed her bag. She went to England. She got a housing allowance. She got a temporary accommodation, and she got a job. So she's now fully British, and she's living there on Montserrat Heritage. Some of the older people said they don't want to leave, they wanted to stay. So the British decided, okay, then what we will do is we will populate the place some more, we will encourage some people to come and live and work here. They set up a hospital, they set up a school, they rebuild the airport and whatnot. We can't have nobody do that for us. Dominica is independent. Hurricane Maria ravaged Dominica, and there was nobody to call on. You know? And we talk so about Maduro in Venezuela, and the Venezuelan government, how evil and horrible it is, and the United States of America is very angry with the Venezuelan government. But here is Dominica, an independent country. The first person that had contact with Dominica's Prime Minister after the Hurricane Maria was the same president of Venezuela. The first the first country that got assets on the ground in Dominica to help deal with hurricane recovery, to help people get water, food, and whatnot. It was Venezuela. The first satellite phone in Dominica after the crisis came from Venezuela. So, as a result, I can understand why someone says, you know what, Venezuela is having some issues, but ultimately they're good to the Caribbean. Because as an independent country, you have to take responsibility for yourself, and there's some things you just can't make it. So you look at the response to the volcano in Montserrat, where you are dependent on someone coming to take care of you, compared to the response in Dominica, where you have a hurricane that flattens the entire country, and nobody to look out for you. Because ironically, all of your brothers and sisters are independent too, but they can't do nothing for you. And you know, the reality of independence is you got to take care of yourself. It's your own responsibility and nobody else's. So that is the nature of the conversation that I try to have. Is independence a good thing? I think it is. Certainly, when we became independent in 1966, it was a thing to do, and I think it is wise. It made a lot of sense then, and certainly if I were alive now, then, and I was in a position to make a decision then, I would probably have done the same thing. But one of the things that I've learned about life as I've gotten older and more conservative, probably more foolish, is that I can't make decisions now for the way that I felt so many years ago. I can't assume that you guys have a different, same vision as me. Right? Now you're from, this is an international school, so some of you here are from overseas. Right? And any Barbadians at all? Right. Okay. How many of you plan to live in Barbados, see yourself in Barbados in 10 years? Of all the Barbadians?
Living or?
Living,
Well,
yeah. Living.
yeah, I would.
You plan to see yourself living here?
I would hope.
10 years.
I would hope all goes well.
Okay. Is there anybody here who is a Barbadian that does not see themselves living here in 10 years?
Everybody.
And this is not unusual. Okay? This is not unusual. I did a focus group in Dominica a few weeks ago, right, for one of the political parties. And there were some young people present. And I asked them, you know, they were very quiet and stuff, and I asked them, well, you're not saying anything about where you see Dominica going and what you want to see for the future. And, you know, and one day said, the reality is that I don't see myself here for longer than is necessary. And I said, but why not? He said, because right now Dominica has nothing for me. And I said, but that's horrible. And he started to vent and he said, you know, most young people don't see themselves here in 10 years. I started to reflect on that because I thought to myself, well, that sounds like a fairly damning indictment. But I've been talking to young people. I had lunch with a kid who was 15 the other day. And he said the same thing. Because the vision of young people now is entirely different to the vision that we had back in the day. And you know what? When I speak to young people in Europe, for example, you know, and as I said, I've had the good fortune to go to quite a few European countries. And speak to young people your age, and generally speaking, they have no concept of living in the place that they grew up. And the first thing that they want to do is to go and live in a different place. So I met an Italian in Sicily in the summer. He's 18 years old now, and he's saying that he's going to London, he wants to learn English, and he wants to do work in something. But ultimately his thing is he needs to get out of Sicily, which is very south of Italy. You meet people who live in Germany, and they say, again, they want to go to England or they want to go to Latin America, but learn a different language, have a different experience, and experience life in a different way. There's a desire for diversity among young people that does not appear to be satisfied by our old notions of independence, because they want different opportunities. And I don't know that I had a problem with it once where I would try to tell people like yourself, what's wrong with living in Barbados? Right? But the fact of the matter is, I can't do that for you because I've had my experience. I've chosen to be here. But I could understand when people say, you know, I just want to live a different life. I had a roommate for about 10 years who packed up 3 years ago. I went to live in Antwerp, because Antwerp is in Brussels, Belgium, sorry. Just wanted to see learn a different language, have a different experience. I can't imagine myself at 30 years old packing my bags, even though I did the right trip that say I'm going to live in a different place. And, it's a steep curve, but that is where your people are thinking of. And there's a legitimacy to it. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the idea of seeing independence in that way, because ultimately that's the world that we live in. So the other thing I wanted to mention to you is this whole concept of interdependence. And my sense is that's where the world is going. Look at Europe, right, and the European Union. And I know that England has voted to leave, and I'm going to say a little bit about that. But the concept of the European Union speaks volumes about how people live and exist now, and how they are more comfortable living and existing in the concept of an independent world. So you have your independence, and it speaks to certain things in a domestic context. But your independence stops at a point, and you realize that there is a global reality that you have to speak to. And we have, to some extent, made steps in that direction in the context of single market economy. Right? So Dominica is independent, Barbados is independent. I work in 14 independent territories, and then some dependent ones, and then also the Dutch and French-speaking territories. I work in a few of those, right? And the reason that I do that is because while you're independent, there are certain services that you will need you can't get locally. And that's basically the basis on which I've been able to make a living. The reality of the situation is if I were to forced to stay in Barbados, right, I couldn't eat. Right? Because Barbados has need for my services probably once every 5 years. Right? And the reality is you can't live on a salary once every 5 years. You need to work every week. So you move around and you look for work where the elections and the work going on, and you operate on that basis. So that is the nature of some industries, and the interesting thing about it is that I am not that different to a lot of other people who are in professions that are more you could say normal, because there will always be a need for something that you have to get from outside. So we have come up on this concept now of single markets, common markets, regional integration, where you say, let me pull my resources from people close to me that can help me, and that way we will work. So we have our own independence arrangement, but yet still we have cooperative arrangements with other people. And that was the magic of the European community. The European community was an amazing institution. That is an amazing institution. Because it says we have the independent right to set tariffs. So you bring in a book bag into Dominica and it costs 10%. You bring one into Barbados and it costs 20%. But you know what? It doesn't make sense to have separate tariffs even though you can in an independent country. So what we agreed that we have one tariff. So if you bring it into Barbados, you bring it into Dominica, you pay the same price. If I re-export, I pay nothing. And that's the basis on which the single market in the United Kingdom work. Because France produces cars, Peugeot. UK produces Vauxhalls. And the idea is that you may want to export them to each other, or you may want to manufacture them in the country where the cost is cheaper. So because of the fact that France is really good on alternative energy, so they have a lot of wind farms, they have a lot of solar farms, they also have hydroelectric power. Power in France tends to be cheaper. And of course they're having riots now because of the cost of diesel. Macron, who I admire, has realized the best way to get people to turn away from traditional energy is to tax it and make it extremely expensive. Right? It sounds harsh. Ironically, Myanmar has the same concept as well. Right? Gas has to be expensive. The only way we can get people to use solar and other facilities is to make gas extremely expensive. You know who's the first person I heard with that? Barack Obama. You remember when, well, you might not remember, but it was an election 10 years ago. You were all big babies at the time. When Obama was running against McCain. And McCain was talking about drilling for oil. And he had this thing drill, baby drill, which was quite silly. Because he felt the way to get the price of oil down is to dig for more oil. While Obama was saying, you leave out the oil, right? The oil can be expensive, but it doesn't matter. We're going in a different direction because the world needs alternative energy. And he came up with this idea, and that's, as I said, that's what's going on in France now. So as a result of that, companies will want to produce there because the cost of energy is a lot lower. Right? So it makes sense to do some production there, and then it also makes sense to do some stuff in the United Kingdom. And that was the basis of this single market that you had a sharing. What happened with the single market in England with the vote for the Brexit was tragic. It was tragic for several reasons. You're not familiar for some reason. You're an advertisement for the school.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I'm just looking at the face and trying to remember where I see this work. Yeah? Not for the schools. No, this guy. Yeah. Oh. Right. Yeah. Because I looked at the website. When I consider what happened with that Brexit vote, it was unfortunate because you had older people, by and large, who voted because young people tend not to be interested in that kind of thing. And they voted to leave the EU because they were offended by a couple of things. A lot of it was racism, quite frankly. England had a wave of migration with people that was problematic. That was after the war. My parents went to England in that first wave, and you heard about this room rush thing and whatnot. That had its challenges because, I don't think that people are inherently racist, but there's an economics to it. And you fear people who are not like you. And I always say that Barbadians are no different, right? Barbados is a very homogeneous population where everybody is essentially black or Christian. But someone like me who is, I'm openly atheist, I offend people because I don't believe in God. And I don't know. It's not a Christian school, is it? It's a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it creates some challenges when you have to see people are different. And what happened in England was that you had these Jamaicans, you know, coming in, and these Bajans coming in with all their cultures and the food, and the food spicy, you know. You're accustomed to bland food. And you bring in the food with the pimento and all this kind of thing and seasoning. What you trying to do with me? Yeah? Jerk pork, you know. I had a wonderful experience, not a wonderful, an interesting experience where my mom lived in a place, rather conservative place in North London when she was there. And we were very close to a lady called Auntie Mary. She used to babysit my sister and brother and so on, a white lady. Auntie Mary got old. She had, her mind was still solid. She remembered everything, but she couldn't see. So she was sent to a nursing home just before she died. And last year, I visited her, and that was the last time I saw her before she died. So of course, she embraced me very warmly and stuff. She remembered me. She didn't raise me, but she remembered me being around because I would visit from time to time. She knew I was black. And she said, well, you know, I moved out of the old neighborhood because the neighborhood is just not the same. You know what I mean, it's just not the same. I was like, I don't know what you mean. And she was concerned about Arabs. She said, you know, these Arabs have come in and they've taken over the neighborhood. And I'm thinking to myself, but this woman can't be a racist because this woman raised me, my brother and sister and so on. And, you know, she knows we are black. But for her, it was different. Precisely, but the Arabs, I mean, it's different. It's just different. But what she was reacting to is not an inherently racist position because she's not a racist person. She's a good woman, right? But her concern was that the practices of these people who were different came into her neighborhood and they changed it so much. So people walking around in hijabs and whatnot. And you know, it was scary for her. Right, basic stereotype. It unsettled her. Right? Now, she had that experience before when we came in, and you know, she would have these little black children running up and down the house and whatnot. But it didn't seem odd to her because I guess she had an opportunity to experience it. You know, and I always argue that one of the good things about the way the world is structured now is that you come into contact with different people. And I encourage Barbadians. Part of the problem in Barbados is that we don't get out enough. When you get out and you travel and you realize that the world is not exactly like Barbados, you realize atheists are a dime a dozen in Europe, right? Actually, it's a situation where I meet someone in Europe, and when you hear someone talking about going to church, it's like, really, go to church? It's highly unusual, you know? But in Barbados, that is the way that things work. So I went off track, but I was talking about the European Union, and I was saying that that is a reflection of how people are. It's a reflection of where the world is going. And I think the British voted against it because they were a bit concerned that they were losing control, like my Auntie Mary. They felt that this center had been shaken because they have now an influx of Poles, right? Polish. And Polish are white people. I have difficulty understanding how do you discriminate against someone who looks like you. Because it's difficult to work out who the person is to start with, because you sit next to them on the bus. Until the person speaks, you're pretty aware that the person pretty much looks like you and they could be British. But they have problems with Poles, and they have problems with Poles for some very important reasons. The Poles come in, and the Poles take their jobs because they are willing to work for less money than the British will work for. Okay? They have problems with the Poles because they claim that the Poles are nasty, okay? Because they live in larger numbers than they would want to. But there's a reason for that, of course. I mean, I don't know if ever you've seen the price of accommodation in London. People tend to live in close proximity because they just can't afford to live differently. Okay? And the Poles are no dirtier than anybody else, but unfortunately you force people to live in the conditions that they're living in, and that's exactly what happens. And yes, they do work for less money because they're willing to take jobs. that the British are not prepared to do. And guess what? It sounds very much like an experience that some people have in Barbados. Really Guyanese. Because they're willing to do things that we are not prepared to do. And then we complain about them because there's this inherent desire to say, I want to cooperate with you. I want you to come and work for me. By the end of the day, go home. Okay? Come and work for me for a week, but go home on weekends. Don't bring your families. Come off it, man. Don't bring your families and your children. But the reality is that you have to bring your families and children. I mean, that's the way it works. When my parents left on journey to England, they left together, more or less. They had a family and they raised it. And you could argue that, you had some bringing in, but ultimately that's the way it works. You can't say to somebody, I want you to come and clean my house, or I want you to work as a nurse, which is what my mother did. But then at the end of the time, I want you to just go home and leave. No, it doesn't work that way. And that's what building a community is all about. And we have had some challenges in Europe where people have an expectation that the Poles that work for them and do their plumbing will not bring their families to England and live and establish a community and have a Polish restaurants and Polish food, potatoes, and doing all the things that Poles do. I understand it, but I think that the problem is you had a majority of people voting that didn't quite get it. And then you have Brussels. And Brussels is an interesting institution. Brussels is like a government, right, that had more power than the British government. And Theresa May, bless her, bless, of course, she decided once that she wanted to deport someone from the United Kingdom back to wherever. And one of the institutions, which is the European Court, told her that she could not, because there were broader human rights implications to what she was intending to do. I think it was something with the guy who had a dog, and if you can demonstrate that you have family, and a dog is kind of part of your family, it makes it difficult to take action against the person as far as deportation is concerned. So she was told no, and a number of British people reacted badly to that, because why I can't deport you from my own country based on my laws? Why is it that Brussels is saying to me that I can't do that? And it was these kinds of things that caused them to vote against the European Union. What they are now realizing after the fact is that to get out of that arrangement, you are essentially destroying your whole world. I mean, when you listen to that craziness that she negotiated over 2 years, the British economy is now on the verge of recession. And we are told that whether they take the Brexit with the deal that she has, or they take the Brexit without the deal that she has, that the economy will go into recession in 12 months. It's inevitable. And that the dollar will drop right after they sign. And my thing is, what is the benefit? What are you achieving? Because you've satisfied a few xenophobes that you will keep the United Kingdom pure. The fact of the matter is that they need Europe for trading, and you need Europe for other things. And we need Guyana, we need Dominica, we need St. Vincent in the same way that they need it. So this whole concept of independence has to evolve into a way that we realize that independence is not really a natural state. We need each other. Okay? You need enough independence to be able to essentially control your own destiny, but ultimately you will need somebody else, because the world is no longer a place where we have silos and so on. We need one another to get by, because my interest is politics. Somebody has to do my plumbing. Somebody has to be the architect to build my house. I need to have a doctor. So we depend on each other. So we are interdependent, and countries are no different from individuals. Countries are interdependent. And that, to me, is what I would want to leave with you as the most important point about independence, is that it comes with responsibility. And the second point is that we are living in a world that is interdependent, and we can't continue to see independence like how Barbados saw it in 1966. In 2018, it has to evolve, and it has to take greater consideration of the need for others that we have. Right? That's the school law? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So do I have any type of questions?
Yeah, of course.
Yes? Okay. I wasn't sure if the school law was for me. Could I? Yes. All right, okay. You're Trinidadian, yeah? Yeah.
I noticed you didn't mention that thing.
It was Trinidad?
They don't live in anything from us?
Well, I lived in Trinidad for 3 years. 3 best years of my
I'm asking you,
life.
do they get anything from us?
Trinidad?
Yes.
But do you know we are just about into the control mask and everybody else?
Trinidad has a lot of business interests in Barbados. A lot of Trinidad money is here. But then, of course, oil. All of the oil that we use comes from Trinidad.
Yeah, but you would say that thing. You mentioned Dominican, this place and that place. I'm sitting here waiting for you to say
Trinidad. Right, so maybe we can start with the place that we started, because you were bold enough to explain your idea of independence. Has your view been impacted at all by anything that I said?
No, I kind of agree with what you say.
So yeah.
No, I agree with what you said. For example,
well, your idea, right? You said, yeah. So while he said that independence was really about being your own person and having to break free and whatnot, that he doesn't disagree that it has evolved to this stage. But is anybody who disagrees? Who sees independence differently? Y'all are all anxious to get out of the parents' house and become independent? No. You are.
Yeah. They give me food, they give me water.
There's one person here who vast majority of people are. You're saying that you don't like being told what to do. You prefer to be independent.
I prefer to live by myself. I live by fun.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you to some extent that it is nicer to live alone. But the nice thing is, it's not nice to pay a mortgage. If I could go back to the time when I got an allowance from my parents, I got a reliable $50 a month a week. That was in 1980s, and which $50 actually was money then. I got a reliable $50 a week, and I got all of my clothes and everything, and I basically just used that for bus fare, lunch money, and so on. If I could go back to those days, I probably would, even though I was told what to do. Because part of the problem I have now is I can do what I want to do. I got this mortgage.
First thought that month, you
gotta pay. So it's an interesting thing for our country.
It's like a pressure situation.
I know that. I can get things done. I don't like when I do things.
Peter, there's a question.
Okay, you have a question. Maybe just put your hand up, please.
Okay, I'm asking one.
Go ahead. Yeah, then you.
Let the other person. I was born pre-independence. I do not see a difference between pre-independence and my living post-independence. My question to you, what were the benefits or what are the benefits that Barbados derived from being independent?
But that's a question I can't answer. That's what I'm struggling with. No, I think from what I'm saying, you must have realized that I'm struggling with this issue of the meaning of independence, especially as I sit down and talk to somebody from Bermuda.
I don't feel independent.
Bermuda has no national debt. We have a national debt that is 160% of our GDP. That's strangling us, that is causing all of these problems. And then saying to myself is, what I do try to understand is what exactly has been the benefit to us. Maybe we have been able to spend more on education. Maybe we have been able to do that. But the consequences, it's an issue that I'm struggling with, and I'm still not convinced. I'm still not convinced that we are significantly better off than people that haven't. And when we have a debate as a country about the republic, becoming a republic, all of that came out. Because many people said, well, Guyana is a republic, Trinidad and Tobago is a republic. Maybe we should become a republic too, because that is a natural extension of independence. And here am I, a person who was born, I was born in 1966. 1968, Barbados became independent in 1966. I never know what it's like to live under dependency. But I am asking myself whether I really need to support us becoming a republic, because it's fundamentally not going to make a difference to my existence.
I don't care.
Right. Guyana is a republic, and I am not sure that Guyana or Trinidad are inherently that better off as a result of becoming a republic. Perhaps there are other things that we need to look at and focus on in terms of what is important.
Mr. Wickham, no, sorry,
Yeah,
your turn. You go ahead.
Right. So these dependent countries, right? Do they do anything to like increase or even sustain their GDP? Like anything, or they so solely depend on dependent countries?
That's the interesting question, and I'm glad you asked that, because Bermuda, nobody gets money from England anymore. Right? Nobody gets any money from England anymore. But what Bermuda, the BVI, Turks and Caicos, what they all did is that they set up these offshore centers, okay, where you can tax, you can exist. So for example, British companies could domicile in Bermuda, and they still can. And the tax write-off would be more substantially beneficial than if they were in the United Kingdom. The good thing with them is that they were able to turn that corner early. So if you look at Tortola, the BVI, they basically encourage people to leave independent countries, come there, open bank accounts, and essentially have their money there. We said, you know what, you leave your money here and we will not tax it. And actually there was a time when they said, you bring your money, we will even ask you where it comes from. Yeah. But that has become a problem.
But how would you approve money? They bring money, put in your country, you're not taxing it,
You tax it, but just lower than they would need to.
Very
Right.
low risk.
So for example, the BVI thing, I had a friend who was a lawyer there back in the 80s. And he used to say that it was not unusual for someone to come into the building with a suitcase full of cash and say, I'm depositing this to a numbered account, right? It's money laundering, right? It's ill-gotten gains. But it was legal to do that. You deposit it. And when you say you deposit it, I will tax it. But I will not tax it at the rate it will be taxed in the United Kingdom. And I will also not provide the level of surveillance. So my economy benefits from holding these funds. And I tax them at 0.05%. While if they were anywhere else, they would be taxed at probably 10% or something like that. So I take a lower tax. But the reason I can take a lower tax is because I need less money to get paid. The population is less than 100,000 people. So to provide for the 100,000 people, the 5% of a million I can work with. While if you go to England, you need to get more. So that's basically the way that they work. So to answer your question, I don't know that they do anything now substantially different. One thing was that they had the benefit of major investments before we came to this conclusion that we were ought to do the same thing. We got into that business a lot later. They got into it earlier and they made good money on it. The other thing that they have been able to do is that they have been able to manage their resources better. And I compare Trinidad and Tobago. I love Trinidad. I'm not saying anything negative. But yeah. the thing with Trinidad is that Trinidad came into a lot of money in it would have been the 60s, 50s and 60s with oil. Right? And to be quite honest, the capacity to manage it was never really there. So corruption set in. Right? If you take too much money and you throw it into a small space, you create problems. And the challenge in Trinidad has been corruption. It has also been the fact that only in the 1990s did you get into things like methanol and whatnot that were, like secondary production. But the idea was that you could live off the proceeds of oil, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, they subsidize energy houses. They subsidize gas for those cars. As a result, I have a few good Trinidadian friends, and I always cringe when they come to my house because they always leave the air conditioning on. Right? They come and they press a shirt and they take the iron and they leave it out and they leave it on and go out and go into my shop. Right? And there's one I tell him, me, you will fight, because I love you dirty, but whenever you come to my house and leave this ridiculous electricity bill, turn the air conditioning off when you leave the room. But you can waste electricity in Trinidad because it's so cheap. Right? Now, in my opinion, that has been a bad policy. And that's a policy that needs to be addressed. They have now said they're going to sell Petrotrin. Because again, it was a badly run company, too much money in a small space. Bermuda has never had that. So the level of corruption in Bermuda is very, very low. And it means that when you have a project advertised in Bermuda, invariably the cost reflects the cost of actually doing the project. When you have a project advertised in Trinidad and Tobago, invariably you have transaction expenses that have to be factored in. That makes the cost of doing business higher. You're going to pay somebody, right? So for a couple of reasons, they have been doing better and have continued to do better, comparatively speaking, than is the case in other countries. Trinidad and Tobago had many as well, but I think that the resources were managed a lot better in places like the PBI as well as in Lagos. There are some hands up over here, or some comments over here that you might want to share.
I agree. I'm just saying, everybody's going to be independent until they're going to pay a bill.
The bill paying is traumatic, huh? I was excited when I started to get my first set of bills. Because I'm not regular
First
bill,
set.
right?
First set.
Like,
But-
pay one bill and it's winter, right?
Yeah, it's harassment for me though, I honestly think so. And the thing is, it never stops because it's always something, you know.
But I mean, everybody, like until you can ask for his bill, when usually, like, it's not usually, like, everything that goes with money.
Everything. And then you pay a mortgage, you have to pay land tax, you also have to pay insurance to be able to maintain that.
My house.
Right?
Health insurance.
Health insurance, that's another cost.
Insurance.
House insurance, right? Car insurance. Tax on the car. Yeah, it adds up. And then when you have maintenance that you have to consider, it's like, gosh, I got to deal with maintenance as well. So it's not, and for a country it's no different. For a country it's no different. You take individual responsibility, you got to pay your own bills. There are a lot of things you have to do. This craziness that's going on in Barbados now with all of these layoffs, right? Now, I have lost my job twice, okay? I was at the University of West Indies, and I was terminated from the University of West Indies. I used to work at CBC. I mean, it wasn't a job as such, but, you know, and I was terminated. I know how it feels. It's not pleasant, right? Because it makes you question your ability to survive. You know, I don't have a family, I have 2 cats, but I would like to be able to continue living the way I live and pay my mortgage and whatnot. And that for me was a challenge. The reality is that most people are like that, so you can't just say, you know, you don't take it on. But you look at what's happening at Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. 300 people to produce 3 programs a day? I mean, come off it. What does 300 people do? Right?
Unless you one person walking out, I see 2 people saying, no, that's not going to be like, wait a minute.
I've worked with GBN, right? And I've seen GBN produce the evening news. The evening news at GBN is scripted using 2 people, right? The guy that produces it, he runs a teleprompter himself. The guy that's reading it, the camera is an autofocus camera, so essentially the camera finds him wherever he moves. And there's facilities to do that. So he's in the room alone with the camera, he's reading the news, and he's moving the teleprompter himself on the table. And that's working, and the quality of the production don't seem no worse. But 300 people at Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. But being responsible means that somebody has to bell the cat and say, look, it's time for this nonsense to end. And those 300 people, half of them have to find something productive to do, but it can't be producing 3 programs a day because it's just impractical. So that is the reality. And if you look all across the public service, and I can tell you the most inefficient entity anywhere in public service, there are always more people doing things than you need to have being done.
And it's funny that you have more people, but yet you don't get your job done faster.
No, it doesn't work that way.
What do you see as a result of what is happening? People being laid off and so on. Are you predicting?
I think it's going to be rough, but I believe that at the end of it, you know, the problem the last time is that we went through this in 1994, right? In 1991, we went through it. We laid off people, and we started to retool the public service. The challenge came where we invented the value-added tax. When the government changed in 1994, we essentially presented the UNICEF administration with a pool of resources called VAT. And VAT works very well because it takes money, and it takes money in a way that you don't even notice. So it's not like we tax you at the end of the month, but we take in money for you. Every time you buy something, you pay VAT. So government had a good stream of revenue coming in. And naturally, why not the administration found ways and means of spending it? And VAT is good and bad. It's good in that it's efficient. The problem is that it created a boom in Barbados where government had money and government spent it by employing people. So that really is the beginning of the problem that we have. Productivity did not, in the way that when the structural adjustment in 91 started, productivity was the focus. Then it stopped being the focus because we had money, right? And I'm not blaming OECS for it. I'm just saying that it is a cycle. No, I'm saying this time around, the good thing is that we are doing this at the beginning of a parliamentary term. The Motley administration is saying, look, we are going to lay these people off. We're going to try to retool the economy. Now, I'm hoping that we have a full 5 to 10 years before we have any influx of money. Because there's no influx of money coming like before. Because we already have the VAT. There's no likelihood that we will find oil. Well, we have oil, but that we'll be able to produce it. So once we don't have that, we then will have to focus on productivity, and we have to focus on creativity. You guys, there was a time when most of you guys would be looking at becoming doctors and lawyers. Right. Then there's then. So my hope is that this takes us away from the idea when I was a youngster and my parents both told me, Peter, go to university and get a job in public service. And one thing my mother thought is to say, get a job in the service, the salary is this and that. I worked in the public service like temporarily on a couple of occasions. I can't work in that environment. You know? I can't work around people who watching the clock to see when 4 o'clock comes, they can just shoot through the door. So it's not for me. And I hope that this process will take us to a place in Barbados where young people like yourself, when you come out of school, you will say, let me see how I can apply myself. Let me see if I can set up a small business. Let me see if I can get into video production, you know, all that kind of thing. Let me see if I can create employment for myself in the way that I have. Because I tell you, you know, the knocks I took helped to make me into the person that I was. Because I've realized over time that the only person I can rely on is me. Right? I have skills that people seem to find useful. I will go and I will sell my skills. I don't like, you know, honestly, the thing I don't like about my job is travel because it's disruptive. And every week you have to be going somewhere, and a lot of times you want to be at home, you know. And a lot of the countries that you travel to are not places that you necessarily want to be going frequently. But you go, and it's harsh. But at the same time, you know, it allows me to make a living. So I'm saying that maybe out of this will come more of that, where people will say, let me dig deep and find out what skills I have, and let me see whether I can make a business of it. Because there was no political consultancy as a profession when I went to university. No one could say, well, you could become a doctor or a political consultant. I created this job. I created the profession. And I think that many of you will create professions that never existed before based on your own skills and your own talents and whatnot. And I think that that's good. So that's my hope that, you know, this will come out of it. But it will be gloom and doom. I mean, we're going to go through a year where it's going to be rough. A lot of these people, because you can't say to somebody in the 40s and the 50s that you got to retool, then they can't retool. You know, if you are working in the public service, you're working at Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, doing whatever most of them are doing used to do. What skills you can sell to the public, bodying and employ you? What exactly do you do that you can sell, especially at the age 40 or 50? And that's the part that worries me, because essentially these people are not going to be able to function again.
But Peter, I think it's time that we change our perspective on jobs and what they're like. I recall when leaving a school, where a number of the guys there did not go into Form 6. They left and they went to the polyclinic. Okay? These people leave, that polytechnic, sorry, you know. And these, I often tell the kids that when my car goes to the mechanic and I look at the bill, you know what costs the money? Labor. You know. Some of us feel it's in for days, and we must change our attitude to get dirty and put down a car, there's where money is.
It's higher and lower professions.
Yeah, you know, we must change our look, as you just say. Being a lawyer, right, a doctor. Right now, Barbados is flooded with lawyers, and they are dusting books and picking up cases in an office. You know what I mean? And I think we need our whole education. The structure of our education, our thinking. We must change that way of thinking.
Yeah, but we can't.
Do not encourage a student at Harrison College going to do woodwork, and she was told no. She's not to do woodwork. Not the fact that she's just a girl, but she came from a certain section of the society, and therefore she can't do woodwork. You know, that attitude, I think, is something that's killing us.
It's hard to do it though because our educational system is very it's structured based on society.
Yes, yeah.
And the structures train on socioeconomic groups. You can't put an 11 plus exam in place and then expect after that you're going to diversify your education. The problem is that it is elitist, right? I suspect this is an elitist institution. That's not a bad thing. I also know that parents will do what they can for their children, and they should. But we have to get out of this concept of higher.
It's not elitist.
Well, comparatively speaking, private schools tend to
learning for life.
Yeah, it's just like.
It's not.
But this idea of higher and lower professions is nonsense. And that's something that we have to get ourselves out of because you know some people are lawyers and some people dance for a living. You know, I happen to know a young lady very well who has had some challenges with the traditional educational system. Is not a professional dancer and makes a reasonable living, not a great living, but a reasonable living. You know, dancing and touring with groups. The challenge is that our society has to be able to respond to that type of person. Where your skill is dance, your skill is video production, your skill is there's now a new area where people are into movie production, you know, producing movies, motion pictures. That's big, but again, it's part of the new wave that we guys will have to contribute to. But we have to deal with this idea, this higher and lower profession. I mean, it don't make sense because ultimately, you know, your car has to be repaired, your plumbing has to be done, and you know, my plumber drives a fairly nice car, so nicer one than
well, maids now are coming to work in SUVs.
Yeah. You know, if you are a good maid and you have if you are a good maid and you can have daily work
in 3 or 4 places, yeah, you go. So and it's better too when if you add up for 5 years, bus fare, put that money down on a car, and it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
You know what? I'm here listening to what Peter is saying, and I agree that you need to change the mindset of people how we view professions. But you know, when we have open days, you get the lawyers still coming in, the accountants, but you're not getting someone saying, on my open day, I want a maid, or I want a plumber, or these people coming. It's tending to still go for those professions, you know? So when we sit down here and we talk about this, and then we have an open day, and then you go back and do the same thing that you shouldn't be doing, you can't get the change.
But you have to ask us educators, and I mean this is an important thing for educators to ask themselves and children to answer. What is an aspirational job? Right? I mean I'm here as a political consultant. It's a non-traditional job, but the question is, do you want someone to aspire to be like me? Now suppose I just happen to be a plumber. Is it that you want children to aspire to? But generally speaking, you get people, especially in particular types of education institutions, saying, well, let me be careful what I tell people they need to aspire to. Because we have to get into this higher and lower thing. And I agree with you that it's a challenge. There's a guy who went to school with me that runs a community service. Right? And essentially he's a high profile maid. He does drive a nice car and stuff. But he employs people that come in and clean people's houses. They do industrial cleaning and stuff like that. And that is essentially the kind of person that you probably will have to come and talk to students, because I guess it will take a while before we get to the stage where someone said, you know, I want to aspire to be
Let's change the name.
domestic.
Oh yeah,
Red Decker.
Yeah.
You don't use
But
the air anymore.
I want to hear from some more of the kids though, because I don't know how much more time we have, but I would prefer to hear.
With that, I think that you mentioned about like bringing people, but I think it's also a responsibility of the parents, because I think there are a lot of kind of standards and expectations that parents put on their kids, and it's not just you need to change the minds of today, but you need to change the minds of like everyone. Exactly, because if you're having parents teaching their kids this, then that's what they will learn. Like, if you're an animal to what you're around, like, you know.
You have a great responsibility to training your parents, eh? And you have a responsibility for training your parents. And I'll be totally blunt in saying that, because this is something I heard when I was younger. And I always said, well, that sounded harsh because your parents train you. But the fact is that you also have a responsibility for training your parents. I think that you have a responsibility for ensuring that your parents do not leave this earth the same people that they were when they came in, because of you and because of what you have exposed them to. So my parents wanted me to be in public service. And I think when my father passed, but when he passed at a time when he was sufficiently proud of my achievements that he did not think it was a good idea. He agreed, but it's probably not a good idea for me to go into public service. I'm not entirely sure now that that would not have been the way for me to go. So I'm saying there's a training that takes place. There's also training that takes place in terms of diversity. And I think that in Barbados, that's part of the problem. And you guys are in what appears to me a pretty diverse environment that I do think that your families can benefit from. I mean, in my own case, I recall my parents, well, they had exposure in the United Kingdom to white people, right? But they never had exposure to Indo-Caribbean people, certainly not to Muslims and Hindus. Right? Yeah, certainly not to Muslims and Hindus. But when I went to University of the West Indies and they started bringing all these children in the house, you know, my father was cooking and I had to realize that he couldn't cook pork for the Muslim boys. And, you know, so the first time that one of us stepped over who was Muslim, and you know, my father bring up the bacon, you know, it helps. So that I think I agree with you that there's always a tug of war between you and your parents, because your parents invariably say, this is how I was, and I want you to have the best. The problem is that the interpretation of what is the best is usually based on ideas that were relevant when your parents were children. So there's a tug of war, but there's always a process where you can get to a place where they get to understand, you know what, I did not want my daughter to be a professional dancer, but I acknowledge that is respectable employment, and it's the kind of employment that makes her happy in a way that she would not have been happy if she was doing a traditional job when she went to work. You guys know about an individual called Nicholas Brinker?
Yes.
Brinker, right? He's one of our top musicians in Barbados. Arturo Tapin is the same thing. He blows a saxophone. They were particularly interesting kids, both of them, because they are my generation. I think Arturo went to Commonwealth. Yeah. Nicholas went to Harrison College. Right? And most of Nicholas's contemporaries, the people like Andrew Pilgrim that would study law. Right? Nicholas made a comment the other day and said he was at one of these same kind of careers day things. And he was saying that he can't imagine anything worse than going to school, going to work every day in the way that Andrew goes to work in the soup and going in a courtroom or what. I mean, he thinks he has the greatest job in the world. But what Nicholas didn't tell you is that he had a tussle with his parents. Because his father was clerk of parliament. I don't remember what the mother did. But they did not have this concept that playing music was something that a good, intelligent, middle-class boy ought to be doing for a living. Get a job in service. Become a lawyer. Become a doctor. So he would have had that tussle, and I think that he's prevailed because, I mean, his mother and father before he died, they were immensely proud of their son's achievement. And Nicholas has essentially created a whole new enterprise for himself over that time. So your parents can be trained, you know, and I think that there will be a tussle But that you have examples of people that have been able to get the thinking around into these non-traditional areas, especially as far as employment. I see people young, is that indication that young need to go? Are you going to see last year? You had no girls, well, one girl, one other girl. Okay. So you're a Barbadian? Yeah. Right. And you are from, where's some of the places you're American? You're Canadian, okay. Where's some of the other places that people come from? Is basically just Canada?
St. Thomas.
St.
So is this Barbados and Canada?
St. Lucie.
So the concept of Lockerbie College is basically what?
When you say concept,
you provide a diverse education. What makes you different to other private schools?
Yeah.
The style of
Oh, yes, I will be, I just want to just smooth things over. But Learning Life has started, it used to be Learning Life, and it started as an institution where children who are learning different abilities and disabilities, they came to Learning Life. And as time went along, the dream became bigger and bigger, and now we have academic normal child as well as the children who we take care of. We do take care of. And I was glad to see the years go by that we have a sixth form school, and she's able here, their program is almost over, right? You have a playground and everything back here. Yeah. But things are going to change anyway. The way you, I'm sure you're aware of the fact. I should say you're aware of the fact. But sports school is going to take important part because people are not satisfied with what's happening in Canada. You know what I mean? The school situation is really dread, and I'm glad I'm not teaching in school anymore because I'm sure I'll be familiar. Children are different school.
One of my biggest challenges, and this is something that you guys can probably speak to as well as your experience, has been the issue of dyslexia. I'm dyslexic.
Yes. Children come here and have to see here. You don't have enough of these kinds of institutions. Yeah.
And the girl I spoke about that was a dancer, and that was her challenge. She struggled with dyslexia. Dyslexic children do better in an environment like this, where the program is focused and the classrooms are smaller. And that's something that the public school system unfortunately doesn't really offer. But you struggle twice because you struggle with the school system, but then you also struggle with your own perception of yourself and your self-worth. And that is, it's not something that I have personally faced, but I know people who have had more severe diagnosis.
I think John something has to be trained more, and I'm glad to see, as opposed to Trinidad, I was happy that here in Barbados, they all were ahead of Trinidad in that respect. Because long ago, children with dyslexia and so on, they were hidden. And now that's not it. I mean, parents are not ashamed as they used to be here. So kids come here and visit well, and I hope that continues.
One thing, and I made this my last statement, is that one thing I've always heard is that no child is good for nothing, and every child is good at something. The challenge is always finding out what exactly is good. There's a lot of things you don't know. But invariably, the educational system assumes that you have to be good at English, maths, and public science subjects or language. But the reality for most people is that that's not what it is. So really your struggle in these years is to find out what is that one thing that you're good at, that you can do well, and certainly a school is supposed to help you along that path to ensure that, at the end of the day, you can identify that which you're good at. But the idea that some children are good for nothing, which is a phrase that people use, is unfortunate. Okay, so thank you very much for the attention. And so,
We have me and students. We have me and students.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, y'all made this?
Yes.
Okay, nice. So it's what? Coconut bread and
I think we're gonna start.
cassava flour. Okay.
You have to pay for mine.
Yes.
You come right on already? No, come back.
Okay. Okay, so this one is supposed to be.
It's not ready? Oh, I didn't know. No, we just making presentations. Oh, I didn't realize, sorry. That's what I asked.
So nobody's supposed to.
It's fine.
Thanks.
All right, kids. Thank you very much. You're good on the and tell me next time you have another topic you like to talk about. Let's do something like this again.